And it's crazy to be back. It's crazy to be back. But I got a fax I got to send with those words on it. Hey, everybody. It's me, Dan Bespris, the host of the brand new Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball podcast, or you can just call it Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm cool with that either way. The founding show, well, I guess I'm the founder, so that makes sense. The founding show of the Old Man Squad Sports Network. Before I dive into fantasy stuff, I feel like I have to address the fact that this is a brand new network and a brand new show. So, first of all, I'm Dan Bespris, at Dan Bespris on social media. Please do drop a follow over there. And more than anything, like big time right now, subscribe, because nobody has yet. This is the first moment that this show has existed. This is the first 60 seconds of a brand new podcast, which means I need all of you guys that found me in the old days at my previous show to subscribe now. We got to rebuild it. The foundation obviously is there from all the work we've done over the last 8 years in podcasts and fantasy basketball. But I need all of you guys to just click those buttons now. Once again, for the first time in a very long time, you really do need to do it. However you're taking in the show, iTunes, Spotify. If you want to go the video feed on YouTube, that also works as well. But it's just all new. It's a brand new universe for me, for what I'm trying to do. Today, on the very first episode of Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball, we're going to be looking at the beginning. This is going to be a multi-part sequence of this year's Old Man Squad. Players that were suggested as draft picks by me during fantasy draft season last August, September, October, and how they did and what we can learn from it. And we'll go through them in chunks. But before I dive in to the actual Old Man Squad, I just wanted to take a minute here at the front end to say thank you to everybody that has listened to my shows or watched my shows or interacted with me over the last 8 years at my previous stop. And now, hopefully, many of you are coming along with me here to this brand new venture. This is a podcast network that I'm founding myself, and I'm expecting more people to join up. If you're looking at me and you're thinking, man, that really does seem like the kind of thing that I'd like to get into, I'm more than willing to hear you out on that. I want this to be, not this show, but the network as a whole, to be kind of a podcaster's utopia. And maybe I should have called it Podcast Utopia instead of Old Man Squad Sports. But Old Man Squad fit me better. And no one really believes it when you say you're going to make a utopia out of something. There's always going to be stuff that gets in the way. But my goal here, and this network's goal, and frankly, this show's goal individually as well, is to bring really good people together, really good podcasters, and just everybody lift each other. And just make it a place where podcasters want to be forever. That's what I want. And I'm going to probably say that again from time to time, but that is the core tenet of the Old Man Squad Sports Network. Is just, I want it to be a place where people are pursuing their passions in a way where they want to do it forever. They want to pursue their passions in this podcast utopia. But we can talk more about that at some point down the line. This is a fantasy sports show, and I want to make sure that the first episode we do is about fantasy sports. So let's talk a little bit about the results of the Dan Bespris Old Man Squad before I, again, at the end, remind you to do all the subscribing stuff. And it's weird to go back to like all those years ago when I was asking you guys to do a whole bunch of different things, and I got to do that again. I got to like retrain. It's muscle memory now, but we'll figure it out. Or, I mean, I don't think I have much of a choice, right? I'm going to have to figure it out. So there's the Old Man Squad for folks that are watching. They get a little view of it on their screen. And I'll try to make it large enough to be legible, but also still leave my face at a reasonable size. I would still recommend, if at all possible, watching or listening to the podcast via traditional channels, because everything will go out there. Sometimes we're going to have shows that don't have a video element. So that's going to be the place where you should start. And then, a lot of the time, certainly during the season more so, it'll have that video component as well. I didn't want to put too many things on our docket for today. I wanted this first show to be not too terribly long and just a way to kind of welcome everybody and say hi once again and just, I don't know, man. I got all this energy that I've had cooped up for a couple of weeks here to get back out on a show, and so it's got to be now. The Old Man Squad has 4 sections, which are just the regular names. There are the totals players, the players that I thought would exceed their mark by totals, but maybe not by averages. The games cap darlings, and what folks are seeing on their screen right now is my single not so boring swing. I thought we'd start with the last 2 because there are only 5 names combined between those 2 categories, the games cap darlings and the single not so boring swing. And they weren't all hits. And that's the thing. We're going to go through some of these names that I have here that were not good. There were losers very much on a long list of players because you're never going to get 100% of your calls right. And we'll go through more of them over the next few days, over the next few weeks. We'll loop back and cover some stuff we had already covered on Fantasy NBA Today, my previous show, because I'm hoping that folks come along, maybe new listeners, new viewers, whatever it is, and, brand new feed, basically. So let's start with the games cap darlings, and we'll go ADP direction. And the first one on that list is Kawhi Leonard, who had an ADP of 22. And I had him listed preseason at a per-game rank of 7 and a totals rank of 19. Meaning, and the reason that these guys are per-game darlings is because they were unlikely to last healthy the entire season. To Kawhi Leonard's credit, he basically lasted the whole year, just ran out of steam the last basically like 2 weeks of the year. And that certainly cost him a little bit, but he was still, by all accounts, just to sort of like get to the point on this before we break some of it down, he was a winner. He was a big win. Kawhi Leonard played in 68 out of 82 regular season games, which is one of the highest numbers he's ever had. He was actually number 7 per game. So we got that one right on the nose. But by totals, he was actually better than 19. He was number 6. Because as we've seen before, and we're seeing it again, the guys at the very top of the board, many of them struggle with games played. Not all of them, but a handful. So a guy like Kawhi playing 68 out of 82 games, only missing 14, really didn't impact his positioning all that much. And in fact, like we just mentioned, he was better by totals than per game. What can we learn from this result, which by all accounts was a winning play? Well, if someone basically is guaranteed to be a top 10 per game player, and they're getting drafted at the end of the second round, and sometimes you saw Kawhi slip even to the beginning of the third, 25, 26, 27 range, there's a certain measure of safety in that on the Roto games cap side that you'll just never have in head-to-head. These guys are called games cap darlings because you can afford to take that chance when there's a games cap in case they do miss a bunch of basketball. But if you're relying on them in head-to-head, you're going to wear it. Relying on Kawhi Leonard in a head-to-head league, it worked out for the most part this season, but still missed 14 games, missed him at the very end of the regular season. He's gone multiple years where he hasn't played in the proper number of games. So there was just no reason to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to get really bullish on how many games he's going to play this year. That was never the reason behind Kawhi Leonard. The reasoning was, and we've talked about this a lot on shows on the previous feed, but it's worth bringing up again now. What I'd like you guys to do as you're listening here is to picture a numerical horizontal bar in your mind, almost like a ruler, where it's just marked off 1 through 200. I don't care which direction it runs for you. For me, it runs this way to this way. Mine is left to right, in the air in front of my face. So when you look at a guy like Kawhi Leonard and you look at his ADP, which at the time that I wrote up the Old Man Squad was 22, you make a little marking. All right, here's 1 over here, and here's 200 way over here. You make a mark at 22, wherever that is on your little bar in the sky. And you say, okay, well, I think his per game rank is going to be over here. I said 7, which is pretty far ahead of 22 by all accounts. And then you just start to count off how many games played would it take to get him above his ADP of 22. So if you have a per game rank of 7, and this again is a little bit fudgy because you don't know how everybody in the league is going to be doing on a year-to-year basis. You don't know how many games they're going to play. Obviously, COVID threw everything off for a really long time. But, just looking at this year, for instance, you can look at other players that were kind of in that neighborhood. A guy that was number 7 or number 8, I guess we should say, that missed a ton of basketball was Donovan Mitchell. He played in 55 out of 82 games, and he finished at totals rank of 31. So just fudging the numbers a little, and Kyrie Irving was number 27. He was pretty close there, a little bit behind. He played in 58 ball games. What we're learning is that it just doesn't take that many games for Kawhi Leonard to beat an ADP of 22 on the games cap side. Again, it's too troublesome to worry about how many games he's going to miss to draft him in head-to-head. But, like, where would Kawhi have been if he missed another 8 or 9 ball games? The answer is, still a bit ahead of Kyrie, because Kyrie was number 9. Kawhi had actually a pretty good size gap on him in per game ability this year. But we just talked about it. Kyrie was number 27 in 58 ball games. If Kawhi played in 58 ball games, he probably would have been around 22 or maybe a little bit higher. So you're able to draft a player like that, and then you can draw that bar in the sky. Okay, well, what if he plays, 55 games? All right, then he's, totals rank is probably in the low 30 or mid 30s or something like that. And you create this shaded bar. Yeah, I mean, you can write it down. It doesn't have to be in the sky. I don't like to waste paper. And just say, all right, well, in a best case scenario, Kawhi plays in 70 ball games. He only misses a dozen, and he's a top 5 player. Okay, great. We almost got to that this year, by the way. And in a worst case scenario, misses the entire season, and you try not to think of it that way. But you think like, okay, what if he's injured a bunch, but not a season-ending variety? How many games do you think he misses then? 20, 25? Okay, where does that put Kawhi by totals rank? Like we just talked about it. Misses 20 games. He's basically right on his ADP, maybe even a little bit ahead of it. 25, he's a little bit behind, and so on and so forth. And so that's where you draw this sort of range of results for a guy. And that's why drafting someone like Kawhi Leonard made so much sense, because he's going at the end of the second round, beginning of the third. His per game mark is going to be top 10 because it always is. And then you're just saying for Roto, all right, you know what? If I get 55 games out of this dude, then my pick is fine. And anything over that is massive gravy. And you got so much gravy this year. And that kind of segues into the next name on the Games Cap Darlings, which is Kristaps Porzingis, who was a guy who also got to the proper per game marker. Or was Porzingis 13 at the end of the year? But he only played in 57 ball games, which ended his season rank at 40. Which, again, by the way, this is a pretty good presentation of the difference between a guy ranked 13th and a guy ranked 7th. There's actually a pretty good gap there. But, like, we just talked about it. If Kawhi played in 57 ball games, he probably would have been, number 28, 27, something like that. And Porzingis is down at 40. But that's basically where he was going. The ADP for Porzingis was 42. He was right on that. He actually beat his ADP by totals this year, by 2 slots. I mean, that's effectively just a tie. But this is why these types of players are intriguing. Because when you look at a guy like Porzingis, you thought, okay, provided no catastrophic injury, we take that option off the table for this discussion. What's a bad case scenario for him in games played? 55-ish. It's kind of like the bad scenario where, again, excluding the something knocks him out for 8 to 10 weeks in the middle of the year, ankle this, knee that, shin this, quad that, the back, everything, then it just keeps piling up. That's kind of what happened this year to Porzingis. He was about as dinged up as you could possibly get without a significant thing happening. And he still beat his ADP by totals. What did we learn? Nothing really. Kawhi was better than expected. Porzingis did the other end of that blue bar in the sky we were just talking about. But each of them turned out to be a perfectly reasonable games cap play because of what they were doing each night. Their per game rank was incredibly high. Then we got into a couple of per game cap, or I should say games cap darling guys that didn't pan out quite the same way. And some of them had to do with kind of mid-season weirdness, and some of them had to do with just, anyway, let's get into it. Let's get into each one of them. Chris Paul is the first one, who got totally phased out by the end of the year. He also had a big injury that cost him a month and a half. So games played was only 58. We were kind of expecting that, but we were also expecting more of a job. His minutes dropped as the year went on. He was kind of in the 60 to 80 range for a while on the per game side. He ended up falling to 103 just because he didn't get to do stuff. So that one was a miss. His per game rank wasn't anywhere near top. We're at 50 range where we had him, number 47. Totals 65. Not going to get anywhere near there because he was also dinged up. Surely there's something we can learn from this one. The thing you can learn is that, well, first of all, he's very old. But second of all, Chris Paul probably not a great option if the expectation is him, messing around for a few minutes off the bench. Sure, he had plenty of decent games blended in this year, but when that team was largely healthy, his role was smaller than in seasons past. We need Chris Paul to be in a spot where he's the primary orchestrator, which doesn't necessarily mean he has to be like the main ball handler on a team. He just has to be the guy that's out there distributing. So that didn't pan out, not just because he's old. Oldness does have something to do with it, but he was old the last few years, and he was one of the easiest fantasy wins of all time. The difference here, of course, is that he wasn't the guy giving the ball to teammates right from the outset. He didn't start unless somebody was out of the way. So that is, I think, an interesting little lesson to sort of put in the back of our heads. Don't get too locked in on a player. And the other per-game darling guy that stunk this year was Jeremy Grant, which I'll admit was a little bit unusual because his per-game rank was way off the normal spot. This season, Jeremy was number 121, mostly because he just stopped doing anything besides firing shots at the rim. All of his other stuff has tapered off, and you can blame quite a bit of this actually on being on a team that wasn't even remotely competitive, but he'd been on teams like that for a while. I think you're just seeing Jeremy Grant getting kind of tired of being on teams that aren't competing. Because from just like a general, what are you going to do with the basketball standpoint, season over season didn't change all that much. He actually took more shots this year than last season in Portland. Shot worse, 55% versus 47.5%. Rebounds just gone, not even bothering anymore. 3.5 rebounds a game this year. The assists were fine, but the blocks have been tapering. He had 0.6. That's the lowest of his entire career. 0.8 steals was around where it's been, most of the time he's been a starter. But the blocks going away, the rebounds going away, field goal percent dipping back down to kind of Detroit level, a little better than that, chucking version of Grant. I don't know that the lesson here is really super poignant. He's just a guy who kind of stopped trying in a couple of respects. But I don't know that it was that obvious that it was going to happen this year because he'd been on bad near tanking or all the way tanking teams for like 4 seasons in a row now. And this is the first time we've really seen Jeremy just not even play hard when he's on the floor. I mean, you could say that like DeAndre Ayton was grabbing a bunch of rebounds, but he was out a bunch this year as well. So they needed Grant to go get a board, and he just didn't care to. He wasn't playing defense. He's not blocking shots. You're not going to go all out for those types of energy or hustle things when you're tired of losing. So I don't think that we can look at a guy like Grant. And now Grant is, we'll assess him again for next year. It'll depend on where he's going. He got drafted at 70. So like it didn't destroy your team to take him at 75, 80, something like that. He didn't pan out, but he hung in there for a bit. You knew he was going to sit out towards the end of the year, such is always the case with him. But I want to try to apply this lesson maybe to a broader topic, which is if you're going to draft someone on a team that is in maximum tank mode, you also need to be damn sure that the per game stuff is going to be where you need it to be. And for Grant this year, we didn't have a whole lot of indications that he was going to give up on rebounding and blocking shots, but drafting a guy who's been on a bad team for 4 seasons in a row, maybe you start to just put that little note on the side that says, be careful. This guy might be hitting the point of not giving a crap anymore. And finally, the player that I called my not so boring swing was to take someone who's effectively a rookie. And I had Chet Holmgren on this board at number 51 was his ADP. I thought his per game rank was going to be 35, and I thought they were going to go kind of easy on him as well. I should have probably given Chet a little bit more credit than I gave him in that regard. But overall, it was a great season. He finished at number 19 per game. His field goal percent was higher, and his blocks were a little higher than I expected. So that's the difference between where I had him and where he ended up. He also played all damn season, and Chet was number 7 by totals. So yes, this was very much a win for the old man squad and a massive one, but it also highlights not necessarily a lesson to learn on this one because I thought he was going to miss some ball games and he didn't. We got kind of lucky there, I believe. The lesson here is for you guys, don't read too much into me calling it an old man squad. That's a name that's stuck over the years because a lot of the players, I mean, Kawhi, Chris Paul, like these are old dudes. But the reason they often make our list is not just because they're old, but it's because their fantasy game is frowned upon for some reason. Kawhi Leonard, frowned upon because of health issues. Porzingis, frowned upon because of health issues. And you'll hear about this on some of the other guys when we pivot over to talk about some of the players that are kind of on the regular old man squad. And there are a lot of hits and a lot of misses there. So we got a lot to talk about. But for a lot of these guys, Chet Holmgren and frankly Porzingis maybe, although to a lesser degree, those are kind of guys that also fit that bill of like nobody thought Holmgren was going to score a bunch. So that's why he didn't rocket up the board. Folks thought he was going to be too spindly to last the year. I like Chet Holmgren because he was going to be a high percentages big man who can rebound and block shots. If you have those four things, and you don't even have to be a massive positive in the percentages as a big man, you just can't kill a team's free throws. But if you can block shots and get field goal percent without killing a free throw percent, those are big men that really jump up the board fast, like real fast. Think about the big men who block shots that are basically a neutral or better in the percentage categories. Brook Lopez, he was number 26 by totals this year. Let's get the per game rank up. Brook Lopez is number 45 per game because he was fine in the percentages and he blocked shots. Like, that's all you have to do. Holmgren is another example of that. Miles Turner is another example of that. He was number 54 in a big down year. Like, that's as bad as it gets. JJJ is that typically that kind of guy, although his field goal percent is now fallen back on hard time, so he's not quite right. Porzingis is a great example of almost the perfect iteration of this type of creation. The big man who now helps in both percentages and can block shots. They are very rare. Anthony Davis, actually, big man who helps both percentages and block shots, but also scores a lot and rebounds a lot. So he's not going to slide under the radar the way that someone like a Miles Turner always goes later than we expect. Brook Lopez is the poster child for going later than expected. And that, I think, is the lesson here. And, you also don't want to overdo it and draft a bunch of guys that are decent percentages and block shots because you'll be very good at shot blocking and you'll forget to take care of everything else. But those are guys that can work their way up the rank board very quickly because they're not hurting you. The ability to avoid having a large negative paired with a rare category. A lot of times the rare categories are paired with a big negative. Guys that are very good at blocking shots are often terrible at free throw percent. Guys that are very good at getting steals, typically more guardy, might not be that great at field goal percent. Think of a guy like a Marcus Smart before he got hurt. Or, let's see, who's got issues at field goal. LaMelo Ball, great steals guy. Field goal percent stinks. Freddie VanVleet is a great example of that, although he got a lot of blocks this year instead. The steals guys often struggle in field goal percent, which is why, again, if you can find someone who's good in both percentages, that's also very elite in steals. You have not quite the same power as blocks of launching someone up the board, but you have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, good in both percentages and steals. Yeah, he happened to be number 2 in fantasy sports this year. Kawhi, good in steals in both percentages. Who else could we be looking at here? I guess you could. No, it's rare. Herb Jones, interestingly, good in steals and both percentages, and he was number 62 despite almost doing nothing else. And I know what the counter argument on this is. The counter argument is, what does that even mean for them to be ranked highly? Because, if you create a team of all guys ranked 60 or better, but they're all good at the same categories, you're going to lose. You can't win your league just being good at steals in both percentages. But you can really set yourself up for success because by catching all of those things together, you can go get other categories and not have to worry about things that otherwise you might. Taking the guys that are the absolute best in steals is probably not the perfect example. someone who's a little bit more mid-pack, like a Jalen Suggs, great in steals, but not great in free throw or field goal percent. So how much does that help us? OG Anunoby, not good at the free throw line. Very good in steals, got some blocks, field goal percent was fine. So you get into those guys that you have to sort of cover for them. And this is a little bit more roto-y than head-to-head, I know. But that's, I think, maybe the lesson we can take away from this first tranche of names on the Old Man Squad review board. So let's wrap up this first slightly briefer episode. More brief episode by, first of all, reminding you all, please, we're brand new. Literally today, this show is the beginning of what I hope is a lifelong quest here at the Old Man Squad Sports Network. And this show, of course, Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I desperately need you all to follow on Twitter if you haven't already, so that you know when things are happening. And please subscribe however you take in your podcast. However you found this show, subscribe. Please. Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, whatever other platforms there are. Those are the big ones, but I know there's 1,000 other platforms. Please subscribe to the show. And if you're listening on traditional channels, drop a 5-star review. Almost 900 of you did that to my old show, and I got to start from zero again here, which is a little bit of a daunting task. But please do go drop a 5-star review. And if you have something nice to write, I'd really appreciate that as well, because we want to push ourselves back into the mix as quickly as humanly possible. Let's regrow a brand new show and a brand new network. And I always need your guys' help, but I need it even more than usual right now. And just a quick thought before I sign off. For those of you that are joining, maybe this is the first time you've ever watched a Dan Vespers podcast. We talk a lot of 9-cat. We talk a lot of roto, but I also try to apply that to the head-to-head side more. That was the feedback that we got about 2 years ago, and I've tried really hard to describe where things separate, because you can't play both games the same way anymore. The days of that being a thing in fantasy are over. At least in like marginally competitive leagues, you have to have slightly different strategy in roto versus head-to-head. We're going to talk about all of that stuff. We're going to have a show Monday through Friday, every day, forever. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so grateful to all of you for being here with me. Like, rate, subscribe, review, whatever. I'm forgetting something, but the best part is, officially now I can say we're back, and I'll talk to you so soon. Have a great Monday, everybody. Welcome to a new week. Welcome to a new era.